Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Marching Roundtable podcast. This is Tim Minton. Thank you so much for being here. Really excited to talk to this gentleman, Dr. Brandon Arve. How are you?
I'm great, Tim. How are you?
I'm great. So this is one of those podcasts where I'm on Facebook. I see a post that I think is really interesting and valuable. And so I send you a note and say, hey, Brandon, I don't really know you, but we're friends on Facebook, and I saw this post and I thought it was really valuable. Would you talk to me about it? And you were nice enough to say yes. So thanks for agreeing to do that.
Absolutely. I enjoy talking about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be talking about how music groups and all kinds of organizations can do better with their social media, have content that's more engaging, more effective, more interesting to people. Everybody needs to do that. We're all sort of promoting ourselves online all the time, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. So you're really great at that. So thanks for being here to share your expertise on it.
No problem.
So tell us first off sort of who you are, where you are in the world, and what you do with all this.
Yeah, so I guess the quick and dirty version is I'm a musician and a marketer here in Lexington, Kentucky. Moved here to go to UK to get a doctorate. And so, my activities currently are much more heavy in the marketing kind of realm. That's because I have this long game that I'm trying to play, marrying that and music together. But musically, quick background for me, I've done everything from participate in drum corps, teach drum corps, taught college, private lessons kind of stuff, composing music, writing drumline kind of stuff, writing percussion ensemble kind of stuff. I serve on the education committee for PAS right now. I'm going to be a panelist as part of the panel discussion that's going to happen on Thursday at 4 p.m. at PASIC. So if you happen to be in Indianapolis for that, head on over. I feel like for the most part, other than something like the visual design or drill writing and marching band, I feel like I've kind of worn almost every hat that there is out there, at least to dabble in it, I'm interested in a very kind of curious person about things. So I always try to at least dabble and see what's it like from that perspective. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit about me. Right now in Lexington, I'm playing mostly in the Philharmonic. I've got a saxophone percussion duo. We go around, perform all sorts of contemporary music, teach private lessons. Like I said, I'm still doing the committee work for PAS. But then probably the more full-time job is a media company running social media and digital marketing for retail brands. I do a lot of consulting work for musicians and organizations of that nature.
Cool.
So there it is.
So if somebody wants to that's very interesting. So if somebody wants to contact you to get some help, where would they go?
They can go to brandonarve.com. They can send me an email at barvay@me.com, barvay@me.com. Those are probably the best ways. You can go to Instagram, which is b.arve. Find me there. Yep.
Cool. So you said you're in a saxophone percussion duet group?
Yeah.
Whoa. So what are you doing? Are you playing set? Are you playing marimba? What are you doing?
A little bit of all of the above. My duo partner, Matt Younglove, is saxophone professor and athletic band director at Wayne State University in Detroit. And so actually every summer I go up there and work with his drumline. But yeah, we play a bunch of music by a composer named Alex Minchik, which is kind of a drum set, multi-percussion setup for me. Eric Wubbles, which is kind of another modified drum set, multi-percussion thing. John Fitzrogers down at South Carolina, where Matt Younglove and I actually got our undergrads together. Pieces for saxophone and marimba called Release. So anyway, the instrumentation on my end varies a lot. And the instrumentation for him, he's using everything but Barry sax right now in the rep that we're playing.
Interesting. I guess that's not unusual for percussionists to do all these things in different situations. That's really interesting. It's one of the things that makes you guys so versatile, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about social media.
Sure.
You had said, I'm just going to read the first part of your post. You said lots of music programs are making generic social media commercials, and instead you're saying create value in the form of content where prospective students, parents, donors, and alumni, where they are on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. So what is your basic premise here of how people can be more effective?
So to get to that post that I made, what I was seeing was immediately before I made that post, I saw maybe the third or fourth kind of generic commercial, like I'm saying, being posted to Facebook that I've seen in the last maybe a month or two. And so they look like a typical kind of promotion for a music school where it's, a talking head sits down and they're saying something about the program, and then there's some B-roll and back and forth between that. And so this was just sort of a very quick reaction to that. But so instead of making a commercial, I guess to get to it, instead of making that kind of commercial that sits on Facebook, in my opinion, and as somebody that just graduated from school only 3 years ago, so I'm kind of a recent student. As a student that was paying attention, active on social media, always trying to be up front or on the cutting edge as a musician and paying attention to trends and that kind of thing. As somebody that really was paying attention, I wouldn't have looked at that commercial, to be honest with you, if I was still going for another program. So that's why I was thinking, like, as a student, I wouldn't have paid attention. And I think going off of intuition and that kind of thing, I don't think anybody else is really paying attention, at least the target audience. So, I think that those commercials are great. I think other faculty members are watching it and kind of I don't know, maybe I'm being rude about this, but like patting themselves on the back, like, hey, look at this thing that we put out there. Hey, look, I'm in this video, and it feels like we're doing some great things. And I think it's really, first of all, let me take a step back. I think it's great that social media is a thing that is becoming more and more part of the music community and the collegiate community. But I think the tactics for how it's being used are somewhat misinformed in a almost 2019 world. And that's all I mean. So I think the same content that was in these commercials would be better served as broken up micro pieces across social media rather than a full-on 5-minute commercial. I don't really know the last time that I've watched a 5-minute video on Facebook, even by something posted by a good friend or an inspirational speaker or something like that. It's just the nature of social media is about being quick and short and whatever. So a 5-minute commercial is really not doing it for me. We don't watch it on television anymore, and I'm certainly not going to watch it on social. So
right. No, I agree with you. I've definitely been told that millennials are very much like they won't watch something that's more like a minute long unless there's some specific reason. So you're right, and that may be a bit of an exaggeration, but your point is well made. I think that we want to make these very slick videos and have all this content, but we need to grab people and give them the information they need quickly. So you had a whole list of suggestions of things that people could do instead of making a slick promotional video that nobody's going to watch the whole thing.
I'll be honest, I don't remember my suggestions on there.
Well, I've got the list right here, so I can walk you down it if you want to. However, the best way so maybe we just talk down the list you made that day. But it was, I know you probably just popped out. Here's a whole bunch of things that you could do that are better than a slick commercial that nobody's going to watch. But I think that what's interesting to me is that the things you put on this list, they seem easy to do, a lot of them, and it's stuff that people are already doing. It's just like film it and put a minute of it out there. Is that your idea? It's like give people snippets of your program?
Yeah. There's so many directions that I've attacked this conversation with people. So forgive me if it seems like I'm coming out of nowhere, but it all sort of comes back to what you're talking about. But I think one of the biggest issues with social media and musicians is musicians are musicians first and they're artists first. And they would prefer to put their time into their art, whether it's standing in a practice room getting better, if it's sitting at a table with pad and pen and they're writing out ideas for something, or if they're composing, or if they'd rather be in a classroom teaching, whatever it might be, they'd rather go do that. And they don't want to sit down and think about well, how do I put a podcast together? Okay, now I need to buy gear. We don't have money for gear. We don't have time to create this stuff. So I think that becomes the biggest challenge. There's a trend where all these studios right now, I'm seeing almost every day getting invites to different music studios, college studios, high school band groups, whatever. There's a trend of people thinking and realizing we need to have a social presence. They go, they make the profile, they put the bio together, they put the about us together, and they're all super excited. And then that's done. And they're like, but now what? I'm not quite sure what to post now, So, and I think time is kind of the biggest issue. And so to get back to what you were addressing, I think it comes down to what your goals are. What are you trying to make happen here? That's sort of what I was addressing in that post. Are you trying to recruit people for your program? Maybe you're a private teacher. Maybe you're a studio professor, something. Are you trying to raise dollars for your organization? Are you trying to get a gig being a teacher? Are you trying to be a composer and get your stuff out there? Are you trying to be a drill writer and get gigs? What are you trying to do? So I think you have to really understand that. You have to understand and have a lot of self-awareness for what you're actually willing to do. You know, there's a lot of pressure where we think like, well, we have to do all these things. You don't have to do anything. You can do nothing. You know, if that's really you and your philosophy, then do that, you know. So I don't think there should be any pressure to do any one thing or all the things or whatever, but just whatever you think is best for you. Start there, then figure out what you want people to end up doing with your content. Like I said, if you're raising money or whatever, figure out your self-awareness about the time commitment that you're really willing to put forward, because social media is about being consistent. It's not just about having great content that people actually want to see, but it's also, are you being consistent with this? Because if you don't post for every 2 months or whatever, Instagram's going to kick you out of the algorithm for me, and I'm not going to see your stuff anymore. Facebook's going to kick you out, and I'm not going to see your stuff. So even though I really want to see it, you're not being consistent enough for me, and I'm not going to be able to consume it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you know, and like even like on LinkedIn, you can just open the app on your phone. You can create a video and post it in like 1 minute's time, and it's all right there. So the technology part, there are simple answers to how to do that, even just doing a quick Facebook Live or something. There are ways to get that out there. But the thing I loved about your list was it was sort of like, just show me what you're doing. Show me your regular day. Show me, have an interview a student for 45 seconds about something that's going on, or show me a backstage before your concert. So it's, in other words, it's not like you're stopping your life and trying to figure it out. You're just sort of showing me snippets of what you do. And I think that was what was so interesting to me about your list.
Yeah. So I don't remember if I put this in there. Maybe you could check for me. But did I say something about like making a documentary and not the motion picture? Something along those lines. But,
not exactly, but I like the idea.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people are thinking like, well, yeah, this has to be pristine content, coming to what you were talking about with me, I think off the air before we started. But a lot of people think that, yeah, I need to represent and present myself a certain way. I'm a professional, so the production of this has to be professional as well, and well thought out, like a dissertation or a well-researched paper. And that's just not how social media works. You know, very academic people, I think, have an issue sometimes with doing this because it's quite the opposite. It's about being authentic, being raw, more in the moment, showing what's actually happening and not trying to spin some sort of narrative for any particular reason. So what you're saying is, you know, you liked the idea of just kind of showing what's happening, maybe interviewing a student or something. And that's absolutely it.
Well, like, for example, one of the things on your list is backstage before a concert.
Yep.
So the idea is somebody has their phone and they show me a minute or two of what's getting ready before a concert or whatever. Like, that would engage me. You know, like, there you are getting ready to go. Like, so that's easy. Like, that's a great example.
Literally just going live, or just record it. You know, if you were somebody that was maybe a little bit interested in some video editing or something, or you wanted to make sure that, you know, the people in live aren't going to say something that's going to misrepresent you or whatever it is, then go ahead and just record it and go back later and edit, do your thing. But yeah, I mean, the simplest version is just go live and show what's actually happening. You know, the people that are out in the audience love watching you perform. They would love to see what's going through your mind before you go on as well. So are you nervous? Share that. Talk about it. What makes you nervous about this? Talk about that. How many people are backstage right now? How many people does it take to put on this production that you're about to do? Show the stage manager over there waving hi with the headphones on and the clipboard. You know, like, just showing as much context. I think that's the biggest word for us is context, and I don't think it's content. So showing as much reality of what is happening is super important. For the time commitment, like you said, live it's actually happening. We're standing here backstage. You might as well open up your phone, press live, and go and show what's actually happening. It took 2 seconds to open up the app and press live. And the interactions, the conversations, the feelings, you were already having those. Now just do it in front of the camera.
Yeah, interesting. You also talk about performance clips or rehearsal footage or classroom footage. So again, it's things that we're normally doing. So now I do need to stop and maybe ask you, you have to be careful about putting minors on film out
Absolutely.
into the world. So maybe this is a college situation or you have someone's permission. Like, how does that work?
Um, the context of the post that you saw was more like the collegiate and professional, semi-professional thing.
Right. Where you
So,
don't have to worry so much about just here we are at rehearsal because we're all adults.
yeah, and yeah, media releases and ages and all that kind of stuff. As far as like the high school and minors, I'm not going to pretend to know anything about if there's like federal mandates or if it's all school or if school district level. I don't know. So you have to make sure that you understand those rules for yourself.
Yeah, check with your local
Yeah,
situation and find out,
yeah,
hey, can I post a Facebook Live with my high school students? Probably not. So you just need to find out what you can do.
yep,
But
absolutely.
the point is, it's stuff you're doing. Like here I am
Hmm.
at rehearsal, and even like you said, maybe here I am with this person I'm going to do a concert with, and we're like,
Hmm.
I love the idea of that being easy. Faculty making educational content. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah, so a lot of the faculty, actually, probably 99.9% of the faculty that I see embracing social media right now, which, first of all, I love seeing that they're doing this. I think the reason for doing the educational content has many, many purposes, whether it's recruiting, actually just being involved in the community, establishing expertise, whatever your purpose is there. But uh, as far as the educational side, I think literally sitting there in front of the camera, or again, if you're sitting there with a student at a college, showing what you're talking about. Here's one example. So a student walks in the room for a private lesson. I don't think that you should necessarily record that because that's your time with you. But if you wanted to do something maybe separate on a Saturday and you worked it out with a student, like, hey, I want to make a little bit of video content working with a student and some stuff. Will you be my demo person? Sure, absolutely. So you go in Saturday and you literally teach them an hour-long lesson. This is on your time now for the purpose of creating your content, so I think it's more fair. But just showing, putting a GoPro, if that's what you have handy, start with your phone because phone cameras right now are perfect. The lighting in your practice room is probably great enough. And just showing, again, being a fly in the wall. The camera is just sitting there, showing exactly what's going on. I'm going to see the student do something. I'm going to hear them make a mistake. I'm going to hear them do something great. And I'm going to hear your response to all of it. And that would be the educational stuff that I think would be very valuable to the community. I want to give a shout out to Mark Perrett and the people over at the Gridbook series. I don't know if you've been following the Gridbook series on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and YouTube, but Mark basically, and I'll be honest, I can't remember the other guy's name. It's a duo, so my apologies. But I just know Mark because he's kind of become the face of this. But they started basically with students that they asked them, can you go home and practice this thing? You need to go on the internet to find the content for gridding. It's basically just drumming stuff. Go home, look up some gridding exercises, come back tomorrow and be able to play them. Well, all the students came back the next day. They couldn't do it because they said, well, we all scoured the internet. We can't find anything on this. Well, the two instructors went to the internet. They said, well, we can't believe these students. There's got to be something out there. These are basic concepts for drumming. So they scoured Google and everything else. They couldn't find it. So they decided, well, there's white space here. Our students need it. So I'm sure other students need it. So let's create this book that has all these patterns for drumming in it called the Grid Book. And then basically it ended up here a few years later as an actual published book, and they have a number of other publications out there. Anyway, so their approach is something that I'm kind of thinking in my mind when I think of, say, a college teacher or whatever. Wherever you see white space in your area that's not being well covered, if there's an
When you say white
opportunity.
space, you mean like a
Yep.
topic that you think people need to know about there's not information out there for people.
Right. So say if you're a woodwind player or a brass player, I'm sure there's all sorts of articles out there on articulations and little diagrams or whatever it might be. And I'll say this, I'm not scouring hashtags for brass techniques and stuff like that, but I'm willing to bet that there's very little content out there on this. So that's what I mean. is if you want to be the go-to person for brass fundamentals, then make all of your content about brass fundamentals, whether it's, the mouthpiece to buy or like different demonstrations for buzzing or like whatever it might be. Does that kind of make sense? Like
yeah, absolutely. I mean, this
yeah.
is the same concept behind the podcast and the martial arts education site is let's get authorities that know what they're doing that are great to share their expertise, because a lot of it's not out there. Or sometimes I don't know if you can trust necessarily what you find on YouTube if you don't know the person. I think you need to do a little bit of due diligence. So it's sort of like, okay, well, in the martial arts education site, there's Matt Harloff talking about how he tunes Carolina Crown. Okay, well, I can trust him. Matt Harloff knows what he's doing, you know what I mean? But I think your point is well made. And so as people are trying to engage with their program or with their work, figure out who is your client and what are you good at. And that's sort of your point, and put that information out there.
And what are your interests? Not just trying to fill a space that has a need. Like I work with Marching Health in Elliott, Cleveland. So there's this massive industry for, injury prevention and what to do if you actually do get injured and all the things behind it. And there was really nothing out there as a definitive source. Individual ensembles have their people, but there's not a go-to place for that. And so obviously Elliot, that's a talented musician and a doctor, marries those two things together, fills the space to help that kind of area. Now that's a big area. So it could be niched down even more, like I said, as being like the articulation person for B flat trumpet. Whatever.
Right. And the more specific you can get, probably the more helpful it is, because then people can find the exact information.
Okay. Well, and it helps you too, because then you know what to create.
Right.
The world isn't your oyster, but now you have more focus.
Yeah, no, but I think this is an interesting conversation to have, because I think sometimes where people are thinking, I need to have a social media presence, but where do I begin? So this is great advice, is that whatever you like or you're good at or you want to talk about, then start there. I think that makes perfect sense. And like I think for a band director or a staff member or somebody that's trying to build their own brand or figure out what to share about their program, I think it's the same thing. I just happen to be really good at teaching my kids to catch their rifles. Well, then show me how you do that. You know what I mean? Like, I think that makes perfect sense.
Yep.
On the list, you have student takeovers. What's that?
So, essentially, student takeover would be you give them say, if you're going to do it on Instagram, which I think is probably the best social platform out there right now because it covers almost every single demo. And what you would end up doing is basically you give the student the ability to sign into your account, to the band account, and they would just create content right inside of there as if it was on their own profile, but with some sort of focus of showing their experience. So the purpose of this would be, say it's recruiting, and you're trying to get students to come to your school, college professor or whatever it might be. You let
independent color guard, independent drumline.
Yeah,
right.
Sorry, I keep saying college because I was sort of the direction of this, but absolutely any.
We're not sort of talking about high school kids again because there's rules there.
Right.
But I do think a lot of people are trying to recruit to their winter programs.
Yep. So WGI group, WGI wins kind of group, whatever, any sort of organization this could work for. So the student would basically start at the beginning of the day. They could just show rolling out of bed. Here I am rolling out of bed in my dorm. Oh man, I'm tired. It's early. And then you show them going to get coffee. And literally the whole point, we think of this like, well, why do I care about this student waking up? Why do I care about them getting coffee? Why do I care about any of these things that aren't directly related to band or color guard or whatever it is? And it's because the purpose is showing the behind the scenes. Again, the word context really matters here. So if you're trying to recruit somebody to come to your program, then show what they're going to be doing. Not just their time with you, but every moment.
Yeah,
so
that makes
an authentic experience.
If I'm going to join an independent indoor drumline group for the winter, then what is I think I'd like to know. Where am I going to, how does this work when I go for the weekend and I'm going to be there? And I think that's makes perfect sense to me. And again, it's just interesting stuff about what you're doing. And I like
it's already happening.
Yeah, and you're talking about the context of it. I think that's really smart word to use for this whole conversation.
Yeah, like the students are already doing those things. They're already waking up, getting coffee, going to get breakfast, hanging out with their buddies, talking about whatever is going to happen today, walking to rehearsal, getting out of rehearsal, eating lunch, hanging out again, whatever it is. I'm starting to see a lot of programs do like a day in the life of a student at our school or whatever it is. Come hang out on our campus and hang out with our students and come sit in a private lesson and come watch our band rehearse. Strap a drum on and come drum with us, whatever it might be. So those things are great, but they're really limiting geographically. If you have a really self-starting kind of student, maybe they'll fly to come participate in something like that if they're really interested, but they got to be really interested. But I think you can have a little bit wider net and go directly to the student. Again, this is for recruiting purposes, by going to social media where they're already hanging out to look, and then giving them the sort of like slow drip content of the experience of being a student here. And not just a day, but actually showing it as a progression maybe throughout the semester, So you have one student do it at the beginning of school to kind of show, well, this is what the beginning of school is like at our college, or this is the beginning of the season for our program. And then maybe somewhere in between you do another student takeover from a different person to kind of show the progression, maybe something at the end. Does that make sense? I don't want to ramble too much about this, but
no, absolutely.
Trying to be a little tactical and kind of spell it out a little bit.
No, I totally get it. That makes perfect sense. But what we're telling people to think outside the box, think bigger. And I like the idea of also one of the concepts is to be consistent and like post regularly so that people, like you said already, that shows you show up in people's algorithms, but it also, it allows you to sort of stay in their consciousness, right?
Yep, absolutely. And I want to say this again. I started off by talking about the word time. Again, band directors, organization directors, whatever it might be, nobody has time to do their own primary job anymore, let alone sit here and create content. So the more that we can find creative ways to share in the content creation part while showing the context of what we're doing and representing ourselves well, obviously, and showing what's actually happening, I think is important. So the student takeover thing, director's not even really involved in that, That's handing over the account to a trusted student, an older student that kind of understands like the purpose of what we're doing here and showing that. Yep.
Yeah, let me read some more things that you have on your on your list. You mentioned motivational, inspirational quotes, a repost from recruiting community, showcase the college experience. You mentioned that. Question and answer with current students. That's really interesting to me. Share music community content, events of area middle and high school, showcase local high school music programs, Q&A interviews with local directors, for recruiting, podcasts addressing parent concerns. So in other words, all the stuff that you're doing, that you're addressing all in your job is maybe share some of it. I'm having a meeting with parents tonight and here's why. We're getting ready to go on this trip and here's what I'm doing. I just got off the phone with someone. I think that's really interesting because then it becomes, I think one of your points, if I'm getting it, is it's not like it's something extra I have to think up, but it's sort of like, well, let me just share what I'm doing. Today I had a meeting about getting ready for a trip. Well, let me just share some little snippet of that.
Yeah, and I'll say this as well. You're absolutely right. It's, like I said, documenting and not really creating. It's just showing what you're actually doing already. You're creating content without creating anything unique, if that kind of makes sense.
It's easy for me if I'm in the middle of something to say, let me show a minute of this.
Absolutely. So I think the biggest issue is not just time, but I think maybe like a cousin to that would be perspective, meaning a lot of what we do sort of comes from the top. We look at the older people or the better groups or the whatevers as the trendsetters. And whatever they're doing must be good enough for me because who am I to think that I could do something different? Because it's just little old me. And I think that that's not right whenever it comes to the social media world. Meaning it's not about trying to be the definitive thing on whatever topic you're showing. So if you're a drum corps and you're doing this, you're not trying to say like, well, we're the drum corps and everybody else is terrible. No, you're showing your perspective from what your group and what your traditions, your histories, your personalities of the group, you're showing that. And so that's nothing that anybody else could show. Nobody else could show Carolina Crown. They can't show the Matt Harloff technique. As much as, he wants to put his stuff out there and try to help people do that, it's still Matt Harloff doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so,
that's why I always tell people that the really top professionals are never worried about sharing what they know because they know that it's them.
Well, I've met a lot of people actually where I have this conversation. They're like, I don't really want to show any of those things because that's giving away my trade secrets. And it's but if you're the person putting it out there, they're always following, and it's not coming from you.
Right.
Yeah, that's a whole different conversation.
I can tell you, Brandon, none of the really, really top people ever have that conversation with me. They realize Scott Chandler at the Blue Devils, he can tell you all day how he programs those programs, how he figures it out and designs it, and he spends a year planning it. And he still knows he's not worried about you learning what he's doing because he still knows that he's doing it. And it's not like he's so full of himself, but it's like he trusts that he has all this experience and stuff that's helping him do his job, and he's himself doing it. Everybody can do it. If everybody did the same process, they're still doing it as them from their perspective, from their background, from their knowledge base. So it's always different. So I think if somebody's like, I don't want to give away my secrets, I think that's their own insecurity. I don't think that has anything to do with the real world. All the top people are always like, hey, I'll tell you everything I know about how I do it. And this is what's so exciting is on the podcast and on the webinars at Marching Arts Education, people are really willing to share how they do it because they're aware, like you said, it's still them doing it with their own set of everything they have.
And the other thing too is I don't know what older adult doesn't want the next generation to have better.
Sure.
We always want our kids to have something better than we have. I have a 10-month-old and I want everything to be better for him. So as far as the world he's coming into and everything else. So as far as a representative or a personality in a community, of course, I think it totally makes sense to help out the newer stock of people coming in and give away those secrets.
Absolutely. The other thing they'll say, and I mean, I've had Matt Harloff say this, I've had Scott Chandler. I mean, really tough people. They'll always say, hey, if I can help somebody not make of all the mistakes I made, like we've all been there and we've all made a ton of mistakes and learned the hard way. And so that's the way I feel. If I can tell you something to share you, save you a little grief and help you move a little faster past some of the things I had to do, I want you to know that.
Well, I think it just exposes the kind of person you are and why you got into this. Did you get into this to actually be an educator, or did you get into this to make yourself look good? I think that's what it comes out to be.
Well, all right.
So if you're really willing to share those trade secrets and you're in it to educate and help, if you're in it the other way, then it's about the ego. And I'm not an ego kind of person.
So there we're back to context again. Absolutely. But you're absolutely right. All the good people, they're out there. They're like, I want the kids to have a great show. I want the students to have a great experience. I want to create a great product. And it's not about them. Scott Chandler a million times says, hey, it's not about me, it's about the show. And he says that to his students in the Blue Devils and all the other groups who were every year. Let's make it all about the show. Yep. And so the same thing here. So if you make this, if I'm an educator, I might even be promoting my business, but I'm still promoting how am I helping students? How am I, what is my work? Because my work is to help students do whatever it is I'm teaching them to do or helping them to do. Yep. So and this can be hard because people are like, oh, I don't want to talk about me. But no, you're not talking about you. You're talking about what you're doing to help people, right? That's sort of your point.
Yeah. I told you I do stuff for retail brands as well. And something that's difficult sometimes is getting the authenticity of why you're doing what you're doing as a business. I think, as a side note, we are all sort of personal brands. A personal brand is nothing but a reputation. But why Apple, they do like the Red Project and they give money to certain things. Do they do that because they want to sell products, or do they do it because they're actually being altruistic and they want to give that money and be helpful? And I think a lot of people have this cynical take on that. And I don't know. I'm more of an optimist. So I like to think that they're doing it because they actually want to help, and just sort of the backside of that could be a purchase. I think giving this knowledge, I think you do this because you don't have any sort of expectation of receiving something back, but you just want to give.
Well, and you
Yeah.
know what? It's also possible to grow your business and want to make money while still helping people. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive either. I love that Apple is going to make a donation, and I'm also happy to give them my money because I think their product is valuable. So I don't think it has to be either one or the other. Well, anyway, we need to.
But yeah, getting back to this is, some people think like, well, maybe you're just doing this because you want to be awesome and whatever. Anyway. Yeah, but
my point is, I think you can do all of that. You know what? You can promote your own personal brand and build your own business and try to make some money while also what is your business? For most of us in education, is we're trying to help students, we're trying to teach. So you can promote that, show people what you're doing. I love this whole idea. Give people context, share what you're doing behind the scenes. And the other thing I think is most important takeaway for me is it doesn't have to be wildly intrusive. I don't have to stop my day and say, okay, now let me figure out for the next hour how to do a social media post. But I can say, oh, you know what? I'm preparing for a rehearsal. I just spent 45 minutes preparing, and I'm going to do a 1-minute video on what I just did. I just prepared for a rehearsal. Here's what we're going to work on. Here's why I made these choices. If I'm preparing for a rehearsal, that can help me.
Yep.
So it's that simple. It's my point.
Yeah, absolutely. And, depending on the direction that you want to take your content and the kind of person you want to be to your community, I think even some educators could get away with sort of the motivational sort of side. Maybe it's career conversations. A lot of students ask their professors, like, well, how did you get to where you are? And they have those conversations. And I think that those conversations are often over coffee or in a practice room or something like that in a more intimate setting. But those are the conversations that I think should be broadcast in a much bigger scope from as many people as possible to show that there is not just one path to get there. You hear all the thousands of paths to become a DCI drum writer or whatever it's going to be, drumline teacher or like whatever it's going to be. But yeah, those conversations that you're already having. It's the same thing that I said earlier. You're already doing these things. Now just do it in front of the camera and put it out there in the world for the benefit of the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I was able to do interviews with the design teams for a bunch of DCI course at the end of the season. And it's so exciting to hear, okay, well, why, tell me, how did you decide to use these giant chairs in the Blue Coat Show? And then they talk about this whole process. Well, somebody had this idea and we went over here and then somebody else saw this. And they explain. That to me is so interesting as somebody that designs. Yep. It's like, I want to hear what process, and then why did they end up chartreuse? Like, what brought in, and they explain it to you. That to me is infinitely interesting. Mm-hmm. That's just one example of sharing your process or something that you've gone about that can help somebody else.
Yep.
So, all right. So we got to start wrapping this up, Brandon. This is such an interesting conversation. Final thoughts from you on all of this before we go.
My final thoughts would be I'm excited to see what happens in the next few years as far as this goes, because we are kind of slow to evolve and adopt new things. Seeing as many people embracing social media, seeing colleges create these little commercials, I think is step one, just starting, and I think that's kind of a bigger picture conversation there is to just start. Don't get caught in the planning strategic kind of stage. Just go. Something is more than nothing. And as you continue to go, if you think, well, I have never used Instagram, I don't know how to do this. Well, you're not going to figure it out sitting there reading the internet. You're going to have a lot of ideas, but you're not going to have any sort of tangible evidence or understanding of the nuances of what's actually happening. So the only thing that you can do is to start. Create the page. You post a bunch of stuff with no expectation of it going great. You just get hands-on, just like you did with your instrument when you were in 6th grade, and you start. And then eventually you figure it out. But yeah, just get started. That's my final thought.
Right. And then the nice thing, too, is there are people that have been doing it for a while, like yourself, who can help me. So if the point comes where I'm like, you know what, let me contact Brandon and get him to help me figure this thing out. There are people like yourselves that are out there to help you, too. So it's not – and like we're doing conversations like this, there's tons of resources out there to help you figure out how to do it. This was a great start. I kind of have the feeling that we may need to do a follow-up to this because
that would be great.
We've laid this groundwork, but now I'm sort of like, okay, well, now that this – like maybe we need to do the next step. I hope you'll be willing to talk to me again.
Absolutely. It would be interesting. How do we get a live audience on this thing? We could sit here and we could talk and assume what people want to know and would want to hear. But if there's some way of getting, I don't know how that would play out.
No,
but it would just be awesome if we could somehow figure out a way to do it in real time and like, well, I have this problem. How can I do this?
We're already doing that, Brandon. We have live webinars all the time at Marketing Arts Education. People can type in or even speak and ask us questions. So maybe that's our next step is we'll set up a live webinar where people can ask you questions specifically.
That sounds great to me. Let's do it.
All right. Well, everybody that's listening to this, watch for that soon. If you're watching this, thanks for watching. Brandon, you were awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate it.